All right, CNT125, we're going to work on our voice over IP lab. This one we're going to do on Packet Tracer, which actually gives us a benefit. We can use more phones and do a couple more features that we wouldn't be able to do in the lab room. So first thing, I'm downloading my voice over IP lab direction page, this guy right here. And I'm also going to download the Packet Tracer file that's right here. When I open that guy, I get something that looks like this. This is where I said, well, we don't have enough phones to do 3 each in the lab room, and we don't have a soft phone installed. So we get a couple of benefits on doing this one in Packet Tracer this week. So I'm going to leave this handy. I'll come back to the Packet Tracer file in a bit. This first podcast, I want to talk through the game plan planning and maybe even cabling up our network before we get into configuring. So what we are going to configure, let me scroll to the second page here. We're going to configure what looks like our inter VLAN routing lab, but we're going to add IP phone on top. So we are going to configure our router and switch for 3 VLANs, one for general admin VLAN 1, one for VLAN 10 PC VLAN, and one for VLAN 20 for our voice VLAN. That way we will be able to have the PCs in one VLAN and the phones in a separate VLAN. Okay. We're also going to hook the network up like we see here, where the PCs connect to the phones. That is actually how most business phones are hooked up in an office situation. That's how things are cabled up. So we're going to configure the switch to understand that they're cabled like this and how to actually put these in one VLAN and these in a separate VLAN, even though they're coming in on one port. That's going to be a little bit of sneaky config we're going to do. All right, so to start off, we definitely do need at least 3 subnets, one for VLAN 1, VLAN 10, VLAN 20. So up here, you notice there's less resources here. I'm trying to get you to do more on your own now. For subnetting, we should be able to start taking the reins and doing more on our own. We're going to have at least 3 subnets for VLAN 1, 10, and 20. We're using the 172.16 network. /16 is our default. So all this is our default stuff up here. Okay. We want to borrow at least 2 bits to create 4 subnets. When I do that, my third octet, there's my 2 bits borrowed in the third octet. So my bit count goes to /18, my subnet mask goes to 192.0. And remember, all I'm doing here is converting this to decimal to get that is 192. 192 reflects that I borrowed 2 bits. So if I borrow 2 bits, I'm borrowing to the 64 place. Here's the 128 place. The next one over is the 64. I'm borrowing in the 64 place. So my octets, my subnets will go up in the third octet by a factor of 64, since I borrowed to the 64 place. So my subnets are going to be 0, 64, 128, 192. That'll be my 4 subnets right there. And the first usable address in each subnet will be, I increase this by 1, 0.1, 64.1, 128.1, 192.1. So right there is kind of the brief version, but that is enough for me to be able to do my network map now. So I'm going to take that info and I'm going to move to the map and start filling it in. So down here on my map, I'm going to, like I did with the inter VLAN routing lab, I'm going to start marking these for which subnet I'm going to allocate them. So I'm going to use the 16.0 here. So I'm just going to mark this that I'm doing the 172.16.0.0/18 subnet for this guy. And actually, he's not showing too well, so let's slide him up. Let's try to slide him up. There we go. I'll do it right above that line. We're going to allocate the 172.16.64.0 subnet to this guy. And we're going to allocate over here the 172.16.128.0 subnet to this guy. So now I have my rough planning here. I now know the subnets I'm using for each one, so now I can start filling this in. And if you remember, with our inter VLAN routing, we're taking the physical interface and we're going to break it into, in this case, at least 3 logical sub-interfaces, one for each VLAN. So each of those VLANs will get their own subnet. So the VLAN layer 2 separating, subnet layer 3 separating. So I now need the first usables for my sub-interfaces. So this guy here will become my 0.1. This IP will be 172.16.0.1. And again, /18 my subnet mask, or 255.255.192.0. Okay. This guy here Oh, get over here. Ah. I was going to try to copy and paste, make my life a little quicker. This IP here, oh, I should have left a little room in there. Should have left a little room in there. Let me see if I can sneak it in this way. The IP on this guy, 172.16, it'll be 64.1 is the first usable. That'll be the first usable IP there. And this one, the IP will be 172.16.128.1. That'll be the first usable IP there. Let's see if I can maybe slide these up this way. We'll do it that way, so maybe it's a little more visible. There we go. I can slide this guy up here as well. So there's my IPs. Now, on this network, don't forget we need to have our switch IP. Mr. Brown gets excited and tends to forget that one. So that'll be on VLAN 1, this guy right here. The router is 16.01, so the switch is going to be 172.16.02. That'll be its IP, the next usable in that VLAN, that subnet. Okay. And then I have my subnets here, 64.0.128.0. Now, on this network, we're not going to use static addressing. We're going to use dynamic addressing because we need to be able to hand IP addresses to the phones, and I'm going to have them also hand IP addresses to the workstations. So for this, I'm going to need to do some DHCP config. Well, the first thing I'm going to configure in is the network. Well, the network is going to be this right here. This will be my network line. Get up here. 172.16.64.0 is going to be this first network line, followed by my subnet mask. This network line here is going to be the 128.0. The default router is going to be this IP address of this subinterface right here, 64.1. Okay, so this guy here would be my 64.1. Over here would be my 128.1. Okay, that is that subinterface address. I also need what's called option 150. There's different options you can do with DHCP, and option 150 says, hey, if you're a phone, get your phone config over here, and it points to the address of where the phone configuration can be found. Well, we are going to configure the router to do our phone processing for us, and we are going to configure that on the voice VLAN. So any phones that might show up on the PC VLAN, which will be this soft phone, we need to point over here. So this one option 150, we're going to do 128.1 and point it to this network. Over here, where the phones are going to be on this VLAN. We're just going to point it to 128.1. That's where the phone config will be. So whether you're a PC with a soft phone or an actual phone, we're pointing them both to this voice VLAN, the 128.1. Down here at the bottom is excluded. We are going to hold IP addresses back so they don't get handed out. So to do this, I literally specify a range. I say 172.16.0.1. I don't want to hand that one out. I don't want to hand out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first handful of usable IP addresses I don't want to hand out because I need to reserve them for router interfaces. I need to reserve them for switch addresses, printers, servers, that kind of thing. So I want to say, I started to type the wrong number there, 172.16.64.1. We want to hold that number back, and I'm literally going to then specify the last number in that range that I want to hold back. 172.16.64. Let's say we're going to at least hold back the first 10. So I would plug in this first usable 64.1, and then the last usable I want to hold back 64.10. So this will hold back the first 10 IP addresses for me. I could increase this number to 50 if I wanted to. I can make this range as large as I want. We're going to at least hold back the first 10. If I don't do this, it literally hands out the .1, which is the router address, the router subinterface address. It hands that out. So I have to hold those back so they don't get handed out. Over here on this network, 172.16.128.1 to 172.16.128.10. Okay, and that'll get configured in for that network or that subnet as well. So there is my game plan for my network. I'm going to save my file, save all my changes on my file so I don't lose them. I'm calling this my markup. And now I have enough here figured out that I can start cabling and configuring my network. So let's cable up. Actually, I will come back in the next podcast and talk about cabling up the network. We'll just leave this as planning for now.